My name is Lee Silverstein. I'm one of the members of the Outstanding Career Services team located downstairs in room 283. If you have not been by to see us and don't know where we're about, shame on you, but it's not too late. Our tagline down in Career Services is we're here to support you on your path to success. And that means helping you achieve, working together with you to help you accomplish your career goals. Some of you choose to pursue traditional employment. Go get a job, work for someone or some company, and go that route. But I imagine the majority of the people in this room are looking to do things a little bit differently. And you come out of school, and I'm a photographer now. Well, guess what? You've got two jobs. You're a photographer, and you're also a small business owner. We've hopefully taught you really well how to be one. Not done a whole lot, as much, I guess is the best way to say it, not done as much teaching you how to be the other. And they're both really important, and that's what tonight's about. So I want to introduce to you a good friend of mine who I've known for some time now, who has volunteered to come spend some time with us and help you on your path to success, Shelley Walk.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me tonight, and Lee, thank you for inviting me to join you tonight. This is actually really fun for me for two reasons. First of all, I am a brand new business owner. So just like all of you know, I know I've been in business on and off on my own, primarily with very large public companies for most of my career. But about 6 weeks ago, I made a kind of crazy decision to leave the law firm I was with and start my own firm. With me tonight, Chanel, raise your hand. Over here. Chanel Baker is my assistant, and she's worked with me for now a couple of weeks because I have a new firm, so I needed a new assistant. I also have another associate with me. He's not here tonight. His name is Matthew Welker, and he is about a year out of law school. Awesome. And I decided to hire somebody who was a year out of law school because I looked around and said, this economy stinks. And how in the world are these, and I say kids, and I say that in the nicest way because he's like the same age as my children. So to me, kids, but how are these young adults supposed to get started and get mentoring and be able to succeed in life if nobody ever hires them? So I did something that was in the world of law firms crazy because I'm a brand new law firm and I hired somebody right out of school who has no experience. But I thought that was okay because I've been doing this for 30 years and together it's about, we average out to 15 each. Yeah. So I figure it'll be all right. And the other reason why I am particularly excited to be here is not only am I a new business, I'm going to talk to you about what it's like to be in a new business and what it takes. I advise businesses for a living. We'll talk about that. But I also happen to have a child who is a senior in college, who is a digital media and art major. Anyone in here a digital media and art major?
Graphic?
Technically,
yeah.
Technically, pretty much everyone. So anyway, I think I had not heard of the school, and she goes to a different school, and she's 21 years old. And she is going to be just like all of you. She's going to graduate, and she's either going to need to get a job and work for somebody, or she is going to need to decide that she's going to work for herself. And so it was sort of fun as I was thinking about preparing this tonight, because as I thought about it, I said, well, wow, this is exactly what my daughter Hannah needs to know. Because chances are she's going to work for herself. And chances are that she will be most successful working for herself. So what you do is very near and dear to my heart, and I want this to be interactive tonight. I want you to ask me hard questions and tell me about what you're doing so that we customize tonight's presentation to the things you want to learn about the most. I'll give you a little bit of background on me just so you understand where I'm coming from and what I've done, and maybe it will help put some context into what we're going to talk about tonight. As I said, new law firm. It's called Walk Law Firm PA. If anybody wants a business card, it's up there. But you've got contact information. Our firm is very much exclusive to counseling businesses. So when people call me up and say, you know, will you help me with my will? The answer is no, we don't do that. Will you help me with my car accident case? I would be delighted to help you find another attorney, is what I would normally say. And as you go into business, you have to make some hard decisions about what kind of business you're going to be and what you will specialize in. In my case, I am 28 years out of law school. I have spent 28 years representing businesses. I joke around and say I've never helped a person. It's not really true. I help people all day long. However, I help people in their business life. And that's what makes us different. As a matter of fact, the reason I get SEO on my websites, and I have one website that is under construction at the moment, and I have others that are out there, but the best reason people come to my website is because when they get there, they're coming for the purpose. You know, they understand the purpose they're looking for. They're looking for a Tampa Bay business lawyer. They know they are looking for, and I have one website called the Flat Fee Lawyer. They know they're looking for a lawyer who's going to charge a flat fee, not an hourly rate. And I think all of you probably know a lot about that kind of stuff. This is, you know, you're studying this area, and you know a lot more about technology than us old people do, who kind of had to, you know, find our way about it. The other thing I do is I am a resource and educator for SCORE. And Lee first contacted me and said, you work with SCORE, is there any way that you or somebody from SCORE could come out and talk to us? Does anyone know what SCORE is? Got one over there. It's the Service Corps of Retired Executives. So what we do at SCORE is we counsel businesses for free. You can get somebody who has been in business for themselves, has worked in big business, has been in all sorts of jobs, human resource jobs, executive jobs, finance jobs, and you can get them to help you as you start your business for free. And I don't know where you can get a better deal than that. And these people have tremendous experience, and they really do it for the love of mentoring. SCORE also offers seminars. I teach one. Next time I teach is on November 17th, and it is a going into business seminar. So this is a model. This is a little bit. This is kind of a I don't know, Reader's Digest version, and the flavor of that seminar tonight is what we're going to do. But it's a 3.5-hour seminar. We charge $35 for a seminar. We usually get 6 to 8 people in a classroom. The classroom looks a lot like the folks in this room. Generally, there are people who are not right out of college, but more people who have worked a little bit, maybe are in a different career, trying to switch careers, maybe thinking of starting their own business, going into competition with their current employer, all sorts of things like that. And it is a joy to work with that organization because we get to see so many businesses, and all of us who work with the organization are free. So we volunteer our time. And I would just recommend, if you want to think about coursework and other things you can do that doesn't cost you anything, $35 for a 3.5-hour seminar is pretty good. Going into business, there's a marketing and sales seminar. There's a business planning seminar, teaches you how to write a business plan. We've had a QuickBooks seminar. I mean, pretty much everything that you need. And so one of the things you're going to see me do tonight is give you resources all night long. I'm going to give you resources and places you can go. And Lee's going to get a copy of my slides. So if you're somebody who likes to listen and not look at slides on your desk and take notes on that, you can get the slides later from Lee. So a little bit more about my background. I have been both a business executive as well as a lawyer. Most of my career I've been either the general counsel or chief administrative officer for very large public companies. When I was with Sherwin-Williams, though, I did something that was really a little different. I was in the legal department, and I left the legal department and ran the licensed brands group for about 5 years. And that was Ralph Lauren and Martha Stewart. So I spent every week in New York and spent my day with Ralph on Tuesday and Martha on Wednesday. And it was a very exciting time in my life, and I was fairly young in my career and not really even appreciating just what exposure I was getting. But as a business leader who happened to be a lawyer, I was able to start to understand what businesses need, what it means to be responsible for a profit and loss, what it really means to be responsible for a team, in my case of 700, and how to lead 700 people in the right direction, in the same direction, and how to make sure that the communications were clear, how to make sure everybody was on the same page. I probably learned more in that 5 years as a business leader than I learned in the 25 years as a law firm lawyer, general counsel. I then later went on to become a general counsel, chief administrative officer for a couple of other public companies, and in my retirement, I started my own law firm. I worked with another firm here in town for a little bit, but then I started my own firm. And the reason I started my own firm is I had the need to work for me. For the first time in my life, I really needed to know that I was working for Shelley Walk and for the success of Shelley Walk. And I was at an age and a stage in my life where I knew I needed to deliver value to my clients. I wanted to be client-centric. I didn't want to put a law firm together that was going to be about how I would succeed. I wanted a law firm that was going to be about how my clients would succeed. And it was very important to me to redesign the way we practice law and to get off of the idea that the more hours we bill at the higher rate, the more money we make, and instead be in a place where the better advice we give, the more successful our clients are. The more successful our clients are, the more they use us, and therefore we are very successful. And I do that with flat fees. I do that with capped rates. I put together all sorts of different fee structures to make that happen. And it is way out there for the world of lawyers, because everyone knows lawyers are all about hourly rates. I gave you a little bit about SCORE, talked a little bit about one-on-one counseling. Let me tell you what we're going to cover today, and then I want to talk to you about why you're here and why you want to be in business, because you've heard a little bit about why I wanted to be in business for myself. So today we're going to cover organizational choices, meaning, LLC, proprietorship. We're going to talk a little bit about tax, something that we all have to be conscious of. Here in Florida, sometimes we think, oh, it's not a big deal because we don't pay personal income tax. Well, you do pay corporate tax if you're a corporation, so we're going to talk about that. Intellectual property considerations. Now, normally when I give this presentation, that is like a one-liner. In this group, it's a huge part of this presentation. I think that it's very important with what you all do. Intellectual property is key, and as I said, it's near and dear to my heart. I ran licensed brands. Many of my clients are software companies, IT help companies, engineering companies. I have all kinds of media companies that I work with, and so we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. And that's the reason why we said we have some agreements up there. They're samples, but I want to talk to you about those different kinds of agreements, and I want you to be able to take a look at them and see them, and then we can talk about what's right for you, because not all agreements are created equal. Talk about insurance, something that costs money. People think of it as an expense. I think of it as an asset, and we'll talk about why. Basic accounting. I'm not going to tell anyone I'm an accountant, but I know enough to get myself in pretty good trouble. And business planning. We're going to talk about business planning, which is very near and dear to my heart. So when we talk about my law firm, we present ourselves as business lawyers, and we specialize in helping business succeed. Okay, so here's the question. Why do you want to be in business? Anyone? What's it? Okay.
But I would like to basically work for myself.
Okay.
I don't want to work for corporate America.
Okay.
I want to go do what I like doing. I want to set my own hours. I want to be able to go and have to wake up, not to an alarm clock, but to the time that I would like to be able to wake up.
Okay.
That's just my perspective.
Okay. And you got to think about whether or not that's at 5 in the morning or whether that's at 5 in the evening.
Yeah.
But how are you going to make money doing it if it's 5 in the evening?
Yeah.
Who else? Why else would someone else want to be in business?
I have new ideas that I want to share with a couple of different products.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Let me tell you what, according to the Small Business Administration, they say the reasons people want to be in business. Be my own boss. Don't want to report to someone. That was me this time. Okay? And the truth is, I've been the boss at a very large company for such a long time that I couldn't imagine I did it for about 10 months. I worked with another law firm. I couldn't imagine continuing to work for this guy, even though he's the greatest guy in the world and one of my best friends. I'm like, I just can't keep doing this. Make more money. Anyone want to make more money?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. Satisfy entrepreneurial drive. You've got ideas and designs that you want to share. The prestige of owning your own company, being able to say, this is mine. I did this. Recover from a downsizing. That's a kind of new one. There are a lot of people in society today who were downsized out of their organizations. They didn't think they were going to go work for themselves. But the thought of going back out and getting another job and maybe being downsized again, or they've looked, maybe they're 45, 50, 55, 60, and finding another job isn't so easy anymore. Use your specific talents and qualifications. It's hard to find a job that does what I do, does it my way. That was a big one for me. I have an idea of how I specifically can help businesses, and it's a little different than what most business lawyers do, because I provide both business planning as well as legal planning for businesses. Okay? So before we talk about organizational considerations, I just want to get an idea of what kinds of things you guys have on your minds in terms of what you want to learn tonight. Is there anything in particular? Like, what are you studying? What's
Graphic design.
Graphic design. Okay. Do you imagine being in your own business or going to work for a company?
I hopefully have my own business
Okay.
at some point.
How many of you are graphic designers? Okay, about a lot. Half. Okay. So we'll call that a star. You know, there are a lot of you talking about graphic design. So when you think about graphic design, what are you going to do with your graphic design?
Good question. There are so many different things.
Like
just branding, advertising,
branding,
marketing.
advertising. That's what my daughter wants to do.
Right.
Okay. Go work in an ad agency.
Right.
She'd like to be the creative director is actually her goal.
Or just own your own business and be everything.
Right. And in my daughter's case, she happens to be a good writer, so she actually wants to do integrated communications.
Very cool.
Okay. What else? What other topics besides graphic design? Photography. Okay.
Fashion design.
Music and talent.
And my daughter's roommate is doing animation. Is
Yeah.
that
It's cool.
Video game.
I'm putting video gaming together, and I realize they're not exactly the same.
Retail merchandising.
Okay. You know, by the way, retail merchandising, you should make an appointment with Lee. He's an expert in the field.
Yay.
Seriously. I mean, you make an appointment and find out what he used to do. And he'd be...
Didn't you? It's all right, we're friends.
Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to make him work harder.
That's
But
no problem.
He has a lot of years of retail merchandising in his background. Right? Is that fair?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely right. Okay. Anyone else? Anything I missed?
Web development.
Web. Okay. So when I look at this group and I say, what do these things have in common? You all live in the world of intellectual property. Your greatest asset is in your mind and eventually comes out your hands or your voice or your, you know, with computers and the way things are a lot of times off your fingertips. And you have to protect that asset. But if you think about it, you're the asset. You're just like me. I'm a lawyer. You know, honestly, my law firm is worth nothing. I mean, I have maybe $3,000, $4,000 worth of furniture and maybe a couple $1,000s worth of computer equipment. So if I were to sell my law firm today, it's all brand new. If I could get $6,000 or $7,000 for it, that would be a lot. Okay? The only thing that's worth anything is what I bring to it. Okay, and in my first month in business, unfortunately for me, I actually made more than the $6,000 or $7,000 the furniture cost. I was very excited about that, actually. But that's the reality that we all live in. And when you think about your organization and you think about going into business, you have to think about, how am I going to protect my asset? How am I going to protect my business? And what am I going to do to ensure that my business succeeds? So, you know, you think about forms of entity, and the very first thing you say is, well, if any of you ever done freelance work? Okay, there's a few of you. Did you do it in a corporation, or did you just sign on your dotted line by yourself? Right. So, as freelancers today, you are what I would call sole proprietors. Nothing wrong with being a sole proprietor, but when you hang out a shingle on your own, when you sign on as a freelancer, you are a sole proprietor. Now, sometimes you work in teams. You know, maybe you're a fashion designer, and maybe one of you is doing the sewing and somebody else is doing the actual design work, and you work as a team. And if you don't have a corporation around you, and then you sell that product, you're kind of de facto a partnership. You don't have a partnership agreement. You need one, but you don't have one because it's not really clear how you divide up the money when it comes in and who does what with that. But you're de facto partnership. Corporation, IBM is a corporation. It happens that my company, it's Walk Law Firm PA, is a professional association because licensed professionals we're corporations, but we, by our licensing, are required to be professional associations instead of corporations. So engineers, lawyers are professional associations. But all of you, if you started your business, would likely be, you could be corporations. You could be. An S corporation is a tax designation. We're going to talk about that. And has anyone ever heard of a limited liability company? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a bit of a hybrid. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of go through these organizations. I'm going to try not to drown you in the details. And we're going to go kind of high level. And if you really want to get into the details of the forms of entity, you should probably go to the SCORE workshop because we do it in horrible depth. But this is really, it's really kind of boring stuff, but you need to know about it. So I put the boring stuff up front. Sorry. So the typical new business is the freelancer who says, I'm getting into business today. Somebody asked me if I can design a logo. You know, my daughter designed my logo, and, you know, she does it for room, board, and tuition and love and affection. But she designed my logo, and she did that work. And she's had other people ask her, because she's pretty good, if she could design logos for them and do some things like that, and she does it, and they, you know, send her a check, usually a very small amount of money, but she does it for her portfolio. And she doesn't really spend any time thinking about what's my business. You know, she kind of looks at that as money to drink with. So it's okay sometimes to start your career that way, and it's okay to maybe do some small projects that way. But depending on the nature of your business, it may really affect you later on in life. And you have to think about where do you really want to go? Because in your case, all that artwork you're doing is a personal asset. And when you deliver it to somebody else, you may be giving up rights, you may be giving up benefits, but you may be also taking on some risk. Like, what if you do a design and it turns out that it infringes on somebody else's intellectual property? And now, the person you did this work for, you know, the $5 free logo lady who does the work, and you do that design and you got all of $5 for it, now comes back and sues you because you are now infringing an IBM logo. And you haven't done anything to protect your personal assets, and it turns out that you are an heiress. That you actually are doing this work for fun, but you really have millions of dollars in the bank. Maybe you sold one of your great paintings or one of your musical works, and so you have a lot of money now. And now you're being sued over the $5 logo. What are you going to do about it? So you have to kind of think through why you might consider other ways to structure your business, how you might segregate your personal assets from your business assets. It's done typically through a form of entity. What form you pick really depends on your business. So some considerations. You want to think about how hard is it going to be. Like, you know, if you start a corporation, how much work is this going to be to maintain? It's really not a lot of work in my view, but if you have a corporation, there are things you have to do, there are filings you have to make, there are fees you have to pay. You have to separate yourself from your corporation. Okay, make sure you have separate checking accounts, separate credit cards, separate banking, separate books and records, so you know you don't pay your mortgage out of your corporation. You have to think about some things like that. You have to think about risks and liabilities. What risks and liabilities do you have? You know, how significant are they? What's the likelihood that the business you're in brings risk? And you know, one of the things that strikes me is if you're a photographer and you're taking pictures and you don't get proper releases from the model, and the model comes back later as she's now a sportscaster, and you happen to have the set of nude photos, and she's going to come sue you because you're ready to publish them because she's never paid you for the photos. You know, but you don't have a proper release. Or maybe worse than that, maybe she never knew you took those pictures and you have no release at all. So you have to think about, you know, what are the risks in the business I'm in? You know, for the typical photographer, that maybe that's not a risk. You know, but we know it's, I mean, this is a real case. We know that there was a sportscaster who had an issue like this. Distribution of profits and losses between the owners. Do you have partners? How are you going to divide the money up? You know, what I find very often, and this actually I got a call last night from a new client, and she has this problem. She owns a small business. She is she's actually a licensed nurse, and she has a healthcare type business. And she is the brains behind the operation, but somebody came to her and offered to invest in her business to help her open a new location. They signed a promissory note for $100,000. She's opening up this new location. The other woman, who is not going to contribute any sweat equity, but did put in $100,000, is getting 50% of the company. And the person who's putting in the sweat equity is putting in no cash. So one person put in all the cash and one person put in all the work. And you have to think about, well, how do you divide the profits and losses in that situation? What's fair, and how are you going to recognize that? You have to think about the taxation of profits and losses. You know, the way corporations are taxed is different than the way individuals are taxed. So you have to think about, what are you going to do? Do you want to be a corporation? Is a corporation right for you? Need for formal agreements. Agreements between the partners, agreements with other parties, and then governance and record keeping. What I mean by that, in a corporation, you have an annual shareholders meeting, you keep records, you keep a minute book of that. You have regular board of directors meetings, you keep records. If the corporation is authorized to open a bank account, the board of directors authorizes the corporation to open that bank account. You have officers, and officers are authorized to sign documents and to lead the company and to pay bills and to enter into contracts. So you have to think about, do I want to be in a formal organization like that? So the choice of entity it's a kind of interesting thing. It's all governed by state law. So I'm licensed in Ohio and I'm licensed in Florida. And the rules regarding corporations and LLCs are different in each state. Europeans think that this is bizarre, by the way, because they say, aren't you all the United States? What's going on here? What, you know, you mean to tell me you practice law in Florida and Ohio, but you're not licensed to practice in Alabama? Isn't that like just right around the corner? I mean, what's so different about their law? It's like, well, actually when I came down to Florida 5 years ago, I wasn't licensed here. I had to sit for the bar exam. It was an experience in itself. I was a little bit overboard, but I did it. So you have to look at the state you're in and the state you're going to do business in when you start to think about where you want your business to be and what laws apply to you. So you may be here in Florida now, and I have a client in this situation. He lived in Texas, and then he lived in Oregon, and now he lives in Florida. And his corporations were somewhere in Texas, and he had some other businesses that were in Oregon. Now he lives in Florida. He's paying tax in Oregon and Texas still because those corporations technically owe tax in the states in which they're domiciled. So he's hired us to move all of his corporations to Florida, to merge the right ones into each other, to protect his assets so he can stop paying tens of thousands of dollars of tax each year to those other states for merely having his corporations there. So you have to think about that. If you set up corporations, you have to think about where they're domiciled. And when you move, you have to think about, well, do I want to move my corporation? What do I do? Because I'm going to owe tax in that state. If you are a sole proprietorship, you are a single person, you're doing business without an entity, there is no separation between you and your company. Your assets and liabilities, your personal assets and liabilities are the assets and liabilities of your business, and the assets and liabilities of your business are your personal liabilities.
Shelley, does that mean in that case you file just one tax return?
You do. There's no business return. You may file a Schedule C. Okay. So a lot of small businesses do that, and they do it very successfully. And if you don't have a lot of risk and you don't have the need to separate your personal assets from your business assets, that may be just fine. It's simple. There is one rule. If your business goes by a DBA or a doing business as, you need to file a fictitious name filing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's an unusual concept. General partnership. Two of you go into business, you're basically in the same situation that you were in as a sole proprietor, but there's a catch. Your liability is joint and several. Has anyone ever heard that term before, joint and several? Okay. What it means is that you are both liable for the debts and obligations of that entity, of that business, of that partnership, and you're both individually liable. So let's say somebody signs a contract. Let's say you take a little loan out of the bank for buying, let's see, what did we pick on? Maybe you're going to be buying new photographic equipment. You're going to get all new cameras and new digital equipment, and you take a loan out and you sign. It's a partnership, and your partner then takes the equipment and runs away with it. You're still liable on that loan. You're jointly liable, but you're each liable for 100% of the loan. Okay? So if you're going to do business with someone and you're going to have a partnership, you better have an agreement. You better have a lot of trust, I think I heard. You better make sure you really know who your partner is. I do a lot of business work with partnerships that have gone bad. And you know, I love trust. And I love a good handshake. Write it down, write it down, write it down. After you make your deal, make sure you write it down. So there's a way to change a partnership into something called a limited partnership. And I'm not going to go into the details of this because it's a really sophisticated concept. But let me just give you the concept. What it is it's a partnership where there's a general partner and then there are limited partners. The limited partners can limit their liability so that they are not joint and several, while the general partner remains fully liable. I don't think the businesses you're in there are likely to be limited liability partnerships. So I'm going to skip that. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because otherwise we'll get bogged down on stuff that you don't care about. Corporations. So we all understand what a corporation is. Shareholders, directors, we read about them in the newspaper. There are small corporations. So you can have a corporation and be the only shareholder. Corporations do fully segregate liability of the corporation from liability of your personal assets, so your personal obligations. So in a corporation, what you would have to do is you need to really separate your bank accounts. You need to separate your actions. When you take action as a corporation, you sign Walk Law Firm PA by Rochelle Walk, President. I'm not signing as Rochelle Walk, individual. I'm signing as President. You separate, and you keep very good records. You never use your corporate business account or credit card to pay your personal bills. If you have a car and you only use it for personal reasons, you're not going to pay for the car out of your corporation because you want to keep those things separate. If you start to intermingle, what they call that is veil piercing. And what happens is, over time, people say, you know what, you didn't honor the separation between your corporation and your own personal assets, therefore, us creditors don't have to either. So let's say you get yourself into business, and your business isn't doing very well, and it fails, and you wind up having to go into bankruptcy. You can shut down your business and lose your business assets without necessarily having it affect your home. Unless, of course, you signed a personal guarantee with your bank and it was joint and several. We can talk about that too, but we'll talk about signing different documents. And what I mean by that is, when you start a business, like I started a business and I went to my bank and I got a credit card for the business, it's a brand new business that I don't make track record. So the bank said to me, for this credit card, you have to sign personally. The landlord said to me, for this lease of the space, you need to sign personally because we actually looked you up and we know you have some assets of your own, but your company, nada. So we're not going to accept the signature of you as an officer of the company, at least not for a few years till you prove to us that the company can pay its bills. Okay. Yes, sir.
It was just like that too. I started a corporation.
Okay.
Myself dealing with music and talent. And I just recently, 2 months ago, went to go open up a banking account, a separate banking account.
Yeah.
And they told me the same thing.
Yeah.
I went to go apply for the credit card. They told me the same thing.
Right.
So it was like, I wanted to see how would you go about getting a loan, or like, as far as like, if you don't have any startup money, you got it incorporated. I went back doing paperwork.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put that right here because we're going to talk about that later. So it's in my slides. So I'm going to try but that is a great question. So financing business. So now it's your job to make sure I talk about it. If I fail to, at the end you got to say, wait a minute, you promised me.
I know.
Okay? But you're exactly right. So here I've just told you about separating your assets, your personal assets from your business assets, and I've also just told you that chances are if you ever try to get a loan, you're going to sign personally. But at least it's only to that loan. It's not necessarily, what if you're out driving for business, for work, and you get into an accident and somebody is injured, do they sue you personally or do they sue your corporation? What if it's your employee that causes the accident? Maybe your employee loses all of the digital files of a client and now they have no photographs and they've spent a lot of money accumulating those photographs and it's a huge business loss. Do they sue you personally or do they sue your business? And what a corporation would enable you to do is separate your business issues from your personal issues, protecting your personal assets. Okay? A limited liability company is sort of what I call the best of both worlds. It's a hybrid. It's like a corporation in that it limits your liability and protects you from business obligations interfering with your personal assets, but it's simpler like a partnership in terms of how it operates. You have something, usually if you have partners, you usually have an operating agreement, so you usually have an agreement that explains how profits and losses will be divided, who's responsible for different aspects of the business, whether, can somebody sign a contract, under what circumstances do instead of shareholders, they're called members. Do all the members get to vote on it, or just Do certain members get management control and they get to make all the decisions? You can have an agreement that outlines all of that, but you don't have the same record keeping. Once a year, regardless of being a corporation or a limited liability company, you're going to file an annual report with the state. If you do business under a name other than the name that you registered the company under, you're going to file a fictitious name filing. We're going to talk about that again. But essentially, a limited liability company gives you the best of both worlds. Now, one catch about limited liability companies. Here in Florida, there's a court case that says if you're a single member of an LLC, so you're the only owner, and you put your assets into that LLC to protect them from maybe personal creditors, those personal creditors can get a charging order and jump right in and take control over your LLC. So you need to be very careful about what you're doing. And what I recommend to people is if you're going to have a single member LLC, that you seriously think about having a partner or somebody else be a member, because that rule changes when there's more than one person who has an interest in that LLC. Yes, ma'am?
Are you able to get have an LLC in another state than what you reside in?
Certainly can. You will be subjecting yourself to the tax and structures of that state. And you may also have, if you do business in Florida using the LLC in another state, you will potentially need to qualify your LLC to do business in Florida, or your corporation to do business in Florida, subjecting yourself to the Florida laws, which means you will also pay the I call them franchise fees, but the licensing fees to be able to do business in Florida, basically subjecting yourself to the Florida tax structures. Yes.
So if you have like a company though that does business for people all over the country, are you going to be responsible for each state, or?
Possibly.
Okay.
Okay, and the reason I say possibly is it depends on context. If you physically are located in Florida and you do all your business in Florida, and you do sell into other states, but you do it without ever entering those states, without ever, going and having offices in those states, you're just shipping through the internet to those states, chances are you really haven't exposed yourself to liability in those states. Okay. If, however, you put people on the ground in those states, if you start to have operating employees, offices, warehouses, you're storing goods in those other states, you are going to expose yourself to doing business in those states, and you will have to license to do business in those states. A lot of companies I work with are in Delaware, because we like Delaware corporate law for a whole variety of reasons. Right. And so what we'll do is we'll have a company that's in Delaware who maybe owns a Florida company, or is in Delaware and is doing business in Florida, and we license them to do business in Florida, even though they're a Delaware corporation. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to just make sure I got that. If I went to Georgia and did a 4-day workshop as a fashion designer, then I have to worry about the laws and the...
Probably not. That would be a minimal contact. Okay? So all you're doing is you fly it, you're teaching and getting paid,
Yeah.
as opposed to just attending, right?
Yes.
So you're teaching and being paid, and
Or selling my stuff, or doing
or selling
a
your
show.
stuff. It may be
And it's
so
a
minimal.
temporary.
It may be so minimal that you really don't expose yourself to liability. But if you did it every month, I'd say yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And it's a tax issue. Everyone wants their piece. We talked a little bit about professional corporations, and I'm not going to bore you with it because I don't think that's where most of you are going. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, you want to find out about LLC? We spoke on having more than one person just from a security standpoint. I mean, can that be a member of your family?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, I'm probably not getting it, but in what way does it help just having two versus one?
Okay, so this bizarre case that came out in Florida said that if you're a single member, if you're the only owner of your LLC and you have assets in your LLC and you personally owe money to people,
Assets such as
such maybe
fixtures.
your computers, maybe accounts receivable, whatever your business does.
Okay.
Maybe your designs, maybe your patents, maybe your inventions are in the business. the creditor would have the ability to come in and take those assets to satisfy that debt.
Okay.
Whereas if there are multiple members, those assets now belong to multiple members, and they could not do that. All they could do is get a charging order on your ownership interest, which would enable them to get whatever distributions would have come to you, would go to them, but they can't actually get the assets of the business.
So the member doesn't actually have to be a partner of the business?
Well, the
Or
member
they
is,
are?
they're a member, they're like a shareholder.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean, they don't have to be a big shareholder. They could be a member and maybe have no management authority and no control.
Okay.
Okay, you can have an operating agreement that covers that. But it's something to kind of think about if you're going to have a lot of assets build up in your business and you have a lot of personal debt or potential for personal debt. It's been a big issue in this economy, as you might imagine, as people have lost their houses and have deficiency judgments
Yeah.
and not wanting to risk their house. There's one over there.
Should it not be your spouse then, because they're personal?
That's a good question. It depends. And if your spouse is also on that debt,
Yeah,
then I wouldn't put my spouse as the other person who owns a piece of the company, because they would look at the two of you as by the entireties as one unit, and then they'll look at you as owning those shares as one unit. But a spouse is a good choice normally. But if you already know you owe a bunch of money, I don't think I'd do it. Yes, ma'am.
But then you also have to pick a responsible person, because if they can equally do the
Exactly.
same thing for the other person, and they can come for that portion.
You are exactly right.
Okay.
So what's the best route in that case? I mean, what would
There are no guarantees in life, honestly.
Amen.
They're just, but that's this. You're on the right track. You're thinking about it. This is that when you pick your partner, you have to think about these things. I have a guy that came to me, and he happens to be a doctor. He went into business with somebody. He opened a clinic. The partner is somebody he's known for many, many years. He's done business with them. The business was doing all right, not great. But the partner had a lot of personal debt. They had signed on some personal loans, and he had signed on guarantees for the business. The partner used some of the money from the business for personal use, but more importantly, filed bankruptcy. So now my doctor, who signed joint and several on those loans, is 100% responsible for the loans, while his partner just got off through a bankruptcy.
Oh my God.
So you really do have to think about, and I'm going to try to scare you out of business, by the way. But you have to think about who you do business with, and how your partnership is going to work, and who has authority, and whether or not you want to put personal assets on the line. When you're getting into business right off the bat, you are going to put your personal assets on the line. However, you have to seriously consider, do you have enough money? And we're going to talk about this when we get to financing business. Do you have enough money to do what you want to do, or do you need another plan for a while in order to make sure you have enough money to do what you want to do? Yes, sir.
Aside from dealing with union, is there ever a situation where you need to concern yourself with financing tax-wise out of state from where you are located? Say you have a studio, and you bid into a corporation that is working on like a film or something to work for that corporation.
Yeah.
You have to, like, let's say they're in California and you're
In Florida, you may be subjecting yourself to California tax. If you're spending enough time working in California and you're doing business in California, you may be subjecting yourself to tax in the state of California. And you have
Even
to
if
actually
you are
look at the
remote?
facts and circumstances on that.
even if you are remote before?
If you never enter the state, if you never go and do the business in California, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're sitting in California working, you're probably subjecting yourself.
Okay.
If it's more than, a minimal contact is, I flew in, I went to a meeting, I left. They're not going to get you for being in California. I flew in, I got an apartment, I opened a studio, I was there, I rented space, I was there for 4 months, and then I came back to Florida. They're going to get you as part of having spent too much time in California. So you have to it's really facts and circumstances, and you have to do an analysis. A good tax accountant will help you with that, but you do have to think about it as if you start expanding into other states and putting what I'm going to say bricks and mortar on the ground, and you start to have more physical presence on the ground, you do have to be prepared to subject yourself to the laws of those states. Yes, ma'am.
What about the trade shows as a Florida firm, and you go to a trade show?
Usually that doesn't do it. That's kind of more like traveling in. You go to a trade show, you're there for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, but the deals you make there sign in New York, for example.
Right.
The contract and everything you do over there. For those 4 or 5 days, you actually sign everything in New York.
Oh, you mean because you're signing your contracts in New York and you're making yourself subject to New York law?
Yeah,
Well, you may. Well, okay. So we'll talk about contracts. You need your own terms and conditions of sale, and you're going to want to make them subject to the law of the state that's most favorable to you. Signing the contract in New York does have the impact of potentially subjecting yourself to New York courts, but typically a trade show, a situation like that, isn't really going to cause you to have to license your company to do business in New York. The 4 or 5 days you're there, even though you signed some deals there, that's not going to cause you to have to license your business there. But you're right, on the contract front, you may be subjecting yourself to the laws of the state of New York and the courts of the state. I'm going to talk a little bit about tax. If you're a freelancer or a proprietor or working in a partnership and you have a business, you're going to file a Schedule C for your business. Okay, and that's just on your regular 1040. If you want to be treated for tax purposes as an individual, but you want to be treated for corporate law purposes as a corporation or an LLC, you can elect for your business to be treated as a Subchapter S company. And that's Form 2553. And what a Subchapter S election does is it causes you to be taxed personally. So the profits and losses of the corporation, rather than subjecting it to corporate tax, in Florida corporate tax is 5.5%, by the way, rather than subjecting yourselves to the 5.5% corporate tax, the money comes out of the corporation and you pay tax as an individual. Okay, so there's no corporate tax, but you're going to be taxed as an individual. It makes your corporation or your LLC, for the purposes of tax, see-through. It's or pass-through. Sometimes it's referred to as a disregarded entity. Okay, so that's something you can choose. Self-employment tax. You are obligated, if you are not an employee, you are obligated to take the 7.65% that your employer normally would pay, plus the 7.65% that you would normally have withheld from your employment taxes, and pay it over to government as self-employment tax. If you don't pay, if you earn money on your from wages or earn money from your own business, and you don't pay that over, you are violating our Internal Revenue Code. So it's expensive. You pay both sides. You need to know that, and you need to know that if you earn money, you have to pay self-employment tax. There's a partnership return. The 1120S is the tax return you file for your Subchapter S corporation that the corporation files to say, hey, I'm a Subchapter S. It's a short form return. The Form SS4 is how to get an employee ID number. So if an employer ID number, so if you are, whether you're hiring people or you're going to go open that bank account for your business, they're going to ask you what's your tax identification number. Your tax identification number is like the Social Security number for your business. You use Form SS4 to obtain one, and you can do it online. Yes, sir.
Is that 1120 X, is that for corporations too?
Yes,
okay.
But for an S corporation. If you're not an S corporation, you file the regular Form 1120. Not too many of you are going to be a regular corporation. If you're going to find a corporation, you're probably going to want to avoid paying corporate tax, so you'll make an S election. Talked a little bit about what an EIN is. You will need one for your business if you create a separate entity. Okay. So here are the considerations. Yes, sir. Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't. See, now this is the problem. I need my glasses.
I have a question.
Yes.
I had a business years ago, and I obtained my ID, the ID number for the business, and I also have my EIN number.
Right.
Now, there's several times because I've had one employee, and I have a payroll company that takes care of all the payroll.
Okay.
Now they asked me for that tax number, and I'm like, well, I gave them the EIN number because that's what I've
That's
always
it.
used.
That is the tax number. That's the right
They
one.
kept telling me that's not the number.
Well, is it
So
for
I-
a different company?
No, I mean, well, the name has changed.
Okay, that's probably why.
But I mean, when I called the tax office, they said I actually used my social as that number. The EIN number is just an ID number that traveled with me for the rest of ever owning a business.
Not exactly.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
Okay, so your social security number is your number.
Right.
Each entity has its own employer identification number. So if you've changed the name or changed something about the entity and you did not tell the IRS when the payroll company tried to use that EIN, if they would not be able to match it up to the company you're talking
Right,
about.
because I mentioned both business. I went back both to the tax office. They list the number, but they said, I mean, I can use either that number
Or
my
your social security number. You could use your social
and
security
stuff,
number.
But then I keep asking them, then what in the world is this EIN number? So I'm all confused over it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Okay, so maybe we could talk afterwards because it sounds
Right.
like you have a particular problem, but I'm not really sure.
Because they're saying it's not squared away because they use my social and it pulls
Okay.
up both businesses, one from the past and
Right.
current.
Okay, that tied it together. That was enough. Okay.
But I'm still lost.
Yeah, it does. I think you probably needed a separate EIN for the new business. That's my guess. Okay, so we've talked about corporations are taxed as entities unto themselves, and the distributions are then taxed again to the shareholders when the shareholders receive them, unless you make an S election. So S election means that the corporation doesn't pay tax. The money comes directly to you. You pay tax. If you don't distribute money from your business, you just keep it and reinvest it in the business, but there was profit, you will still have to report that gain, and you will still have to pay the tax on it. Sole proprietorship partnerships and limited liability companies are called disregarded entities, and they automatically assume in an LLC that you're taxed like a sole proprietor or a partnership, unless you make an S election, in which case you file an 1120-S for the LLC, and then the tax still passes through. Okay. There are some rules about S elections, like you have to be a U.S. citizen. You cannot have owners that are entities. They have to be individuals. So there's some specific rules about that. Okay. I made this chart because this is complicated. And you start to look at it and say, how much stuff can a person absorb? So I created this chart to use when I teach for SCORE. And it's kind of a summary chart. I have a preference, as you probably have heard a little bit tonight. I think that most businesses should be incorporated or an LLC. Now, having said that, I do think that freelancers are sort of the unique talent in the world, in that as artists, your talent and your assets that you sell are so intricately tied to you as a person that it's understandable if you chose to be a proprietor. But if you actually got to the point where you were producing, where you're, let's say you're a designer and you're making clothing and you're actually producing clothing, I would hate to see you do that as a proprietor. Because if you had employees, if you have any defects in what you design, maybe somebody's a furniture designer, let's say the chair breaks, you really want to protect your personal assets from your business assets. If you pay yourself a salary, maybe you're making a bunch of money now, you really want to keep those things separate. So I do have a preference to the light blue columns, and the dark blue S corporation is really the suggestion that to protect yourself from tax, that you would probably make an S election if you were not going to continue an LLC as a partnership or as an individual. One thing I will say to all of you is think long and hard about who your partners are, and think long and hard about the agreements you need. So whether you have a corporation, you need a shareholders agreement, or an LLC, you need an operating agreement, or a partnership, you need to have a partnership agreement. So with that in mind, you're going to think about what's covered in those agreements. Okay, is everyone with me so far? Yeah. Okay. Covered in those agreements would be things like, I'm putting in sweat equity and he's putting in money, and in return for which we each get 50% of the company. How do the profits get distributed? Under what circumstances? Rights and duties and obligations. He put in 50% of the cash, I put in 50% of the patents, or I put in all the patents and inventions. Now we both own this thing. We're supposed to operate it together. He's supposed to do the sales. I'm supposed to keep inventing. Haven't seen him in 3 months. He's getting 50% of the profits of what I invent, and no one is selling anything. What am I going to do? He's my, do I have the right to do something about the fact that he's not participating as he agreed? Salaries. How much are people going to take home? Are we going to have distributions? What about transferring shares? I need a little cash. I'm going to sell half of my interest, so you and I are partners. I'm going to sell 20, 30 of my shares to Chanel, who you just met tonight, and she's now one of our partners because I needed some cash. Should that be able to happen, or should you have a say over who gets to buy those shares? Should you get a right of first refusal? Should you have rules about transfer? What about in a divorce? I mean, this is something I cover in all my agreements. It's a common circumstance today. A lot of people marry and then later divorce. In the event of a divorce, should the ex-husband, ex-wife have an interest in the company? It's my company. Let's say you and I own this company together, and we're really pretty good together. We're doing a great job. You want to be partners with my ex-husband? You've never met him. He's a tax guy. He's appointed head accountant, so I don't know. You got to think about it. Do you want to be his partner? Well, what are you going to do to make sure when you enter into this agreement that you as a business owner don't suddenly find yourself in a partnership with your partner's ex? Or, God forbid, a partner becomes disabled, or even worse, suffers a heart attack and passes away. Are you now partners with his children? But what you really need to sit down with your partner and think about those things and write them into an agreement. You can buy insurance, key man life insurance, to buy out spouses and families. You can put financial programs together to think about how you might take out a partner. What would happen if the partnership doesn't work out? How would you dissolve it? Do one of the two of you have the right to buy each other out? You really need those things in an agreement. And I will tell you, I specialize in this area of law. I do a lot of work in this area of law. If you came to me with your car accident case, I'd refer you to another lawyer. When you go to a lawyer, when you hire professionals, when you hire an accountant, when you hire an insurance broker, pick people who work in the area of law, that work in the area of accounting, that work in the area of insurance, that you are in. Don't go to just somebody. Don't go to your neighbor, your friend, your uncle. If this isn't what they do, this is not for them. And I know it will cost you a little money to get to the right professional. Get to the right professionals. Find accountants who know how to work with small businesses. Find insurance brokers, ask them hard questions. Because we're going to talk about insurance a little bit, and you're going to be stunned to find out what your insurance doesn't cover, unless you ask the questions. Fictitious names. So people confuse fictitious names with trademarks and trade names. They are not the same. Fictitious names is for the convenience of everybody else. It's to let us know that I actually have a DBA called the Flat Fee Lawyer. That is a fictitious name of a sort. Okay? My company is called the Walk Law Firm. But I do business under other names. Fictitious names is a way to put the world on notice that you have a DBA. It is not an asset. It doesn't protect your name. It doesn't help you in any manner whatsoever. It helps the rest of the world find you. It is a legal obligation if you have a DBA to file a fictitious name filing with the state, but please do not think that it's the same thing as a trademark or trade name. I've had so many people come in and say, oh, I'm all set. I've got my fictitious name filed, so I'm all protected. Not in the least. So, does anyone want to like stretch for a minute? I know this is a really lot to take on at one time. Okay.
Could you go to the previous slide, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Lee, tell me what time you want me to end at.
We got like maybe 20 minutes or so.
Okay. So I'm going to start to go a little bit faster on some of this. Intellectual property. Trademarks, trade dress, trade names, domain names, patents, copyrights, licenses. Okay?
By the way, everybody will get copies of these slides.
Yeah.
That's why you signed up with your email. So don't worry if you don't get everything. You'll get copies.
Okay.
Okay?
Trademarks, names, and dress are, there's both state filings, federal filings, and international filings. Okay? Very important. It's the way you protect your intellectual property. Okay? In order to protect a trademark, trade name, trade dress, you have to use it in commerce. So, you know, your painting cannot be trademarked unless it's actually being used in commerce. Your logos can't be trademarked until you actually use them. You have to register them to maintain them. It gives you rights to protect yourself from other people using your marks, and it also gives you the right to, you know, to call it your own. You may not infringe on somebody else's mark, though, when you try to trademark your own intellectual property. Domain names are not registered marks. They are registered domain names. They may be your intellectual property, but if you want to protect www.askgary.com, you need to file a trademark for it, okay, separate from just owning the domain name. Copyrights. Something else near and dear to your hearts. So that painting I described that you can't trademark because it's not used in commerce, you might be able to get a copyright on the design. The same thing with copy that you write, words, music, code if you're a programmer.
Pictures, photos?
Photos, you might be able to copyright them. You can register with the Library of Congress. These all have websites you can go to do this. It must be substantially different from prior work if you're going to register, so there can't be something, you know, you can't just change one note in the musical composition from something that Beethoven perhaps published and call it yours. It has to be substantially different. But you have a legal right to protect it. Now, you don't have to register to protect your copy. The artist owns, the artist inventor owns their copy and owns their art. By registering it, it puts the world on notice, okay? But an artist always owns their art. Patents, similar process. You can register with the U.S. Patent Office. Information becomes public, so Coca-Cola does not have a patent on their formula. They call it proprietary. It is a trade secret. They protect it, and they don't want to register it, because if they did, then the whole world would know their formula. And over a period of time, I think it's 20 years, that formula now becomes part of the public domain. So people who really want to protect their information sometimes keep it as a trade secret and don't register it at all. So agreements. There's all kinds of agreements that you need. Terms and conditions of sale. So you were asking about, oh, well, I do business in New York. You know, I'm at the trade show. You might have terms and conditions of that sale, and you might pick the law that applies. You might include in the terms and conditions of sale or terms and conditions of purchase how much you're going to pay, whether or not the intellectual property, the source code, if it's perhaps you know, computer code. You might have agreement about confidentiality. You might have agreements about who owns the copyright. So privacy. There's all sorts of things that might come up in agreements. You might have employment agreements that you need. So Lee said to me, Shelley, you need to bring a couple of samples of agreements because these folks want to know what goes in an agreement. This was really hard to do because there's so many kinds of agreements you might need. And I thought about it and I said, well, what? Not the model. And if you sell that photograph and I sell the physical photograph, I've only sold that one photograph, not the right to reproduce it. If I sell the negatives, I've sold the negatives, but unless my agreement says that I am assigning and transferring to the purchaser the full right to use that photograph and those negatives, I still own the art. If I'm hired by a company to do work for them, and they say, look, you know, you're a photographer and I'm hiring you to take pictures of our products, and at the end we want to own the art, that's called work for hire. And I will tell all of you off the bat, I know it's painful as artists to give up your rights 100% to your art, but sometimes it's the best way to make money. And sometimes that's what you need to do. And you need to think about that. But when you give up those rights, recognize that whoever you gave those rights to has the full unfettered right to sell, assign, and use that art.
Can you give an example, Shelley?
So, when I worked in licensing at Ralph Lauren, we worked a little differently. Sherwin-Williams was licensed to make their paint brand. We were given the right to use their logo and their designs for the sole purpose of paint. And it was very specific. So an example might be, we did not have the right to use their logo on our website. We did not have the right to use our logo, their logo, any place other than on labels and on shelf talkers and POP, point of sale materials, point of purchase materials. We only had it to the extent they approved it. So every time we used their logo, they had to look at it and approve it. And we had a very specific agreement over what our license was. I had a situation with another company where we had somebody take some photographs, and we had an agreement, and the photographer was smart. He came in with an agreement, and I have a few samples of these. Came in with an agreement for us to buy those photographs, and they were for print only. And so when we put them up on our website, we got a phone call. Hey, I see you've got my photos on the web. That is really cool. You owe me $5,000.
Nice.
Nice. So some of these agreements that I've been thinking about for you, and some samples are up there, so at the end you can look at them, and then I can email you some of them. Tonight I walked in, and you can see Lee's got his video camera on. He made me sign a release he made me sign a release saying it's okay to videotape me because he doesn't have the right to just take my picture and use it and publish it for his commercial purposes without my consent. So, here you go. Your own school's got one. You can give that to Lee. He needs that. So, in my version, I brought you something called a model release. I wasn't thinking I was a model tonight, but some of you might have models. You might have people that you're going to photograph as models, or use in video, or use in your web development. You might have people that you use their likeness, that you use their voice. You maybe use their hands and nothing else. So when you show a picture of their hand, you're going to want a model release in order to be able to use their likeness. This one is the purchase of rights to photographs for a magazine. It's very specific. so that the magazine has the right to use the photographs for a specific purpose. And you can see in this document, and I just pulled these down off the web. These are not ones that I drafted. And I want to show you can go out and find documents like this. The problem with documents you pull off the web, if you don't get the right one, you might not be getting what you think you're getting. You need to read them carefully. When one's put in front of you, you need to read it carefully. I know at our firm, if somebody brings me a document, we have a document review price. And, we charge $350. Bring me your document and we'll review it for you and tell you what you're getting and not getting. And I don't care who wrote the agreement. And it doesn't have to be by agreement. It happens all the time. I have a lot of clients that shove things in front of me and say, all right, they want me to sign this. What does it mean? So, in this case, purchase rights for photographs. Okay, sample work for hire. That's, remember, we talked about you're going to be the in-house designer for Ralph Lauren. Well, let me tell you what, at the end of the day, when you leave every night and you've come up with that really, really great new home design, that new chair, that new fabric, Ralph Lauren owns it, you don't. You are work for hire. You're employed by him, you're work for hire. Even if you're an independent contractor, you are going to sign a work for hire agreement. You gotta think about that. You're gonna be paid nicely for it, but you're giving up 100% of your rights. You will have no right to use that art again later. Another thing I brought in is a general services agreement, because if you're going to be in your own business, you probably need to think about how you're going to engage in business. And general services agreements will have things like what services are provided, the terms of the agreement, compensation, how you're going to get paid, when you're going to get paid, in what form are you going to get paid, confidentiality, maybe you're going to share some of your trade secrets and they're going to hear, and you're going to see a lot of theirs, so you might be asked to keep it confidential. Non-compete, non-solicitation. You go to work for them, maybe you hire our law firm and you get to know Chanel really well and she's doing a great job, and you say, I'd like to hire her. It's like, wait a minute, I don't want you soliciting my people. You're going to go into other people's businesses. You want to protect yourself from somebody taking away your team, who knows all your trade secrets and all your ways of doing things. I also brought with me a multimedia and technology licensing agreement checklist, the kinds of things you would absolutely want to cover in those agreements. Now, there are lots of forms available online, and I know you guys are all good at this and knowing how to find it. And you can go to Rocket Lawyer or Law Depot or LegalZoom. The only thing I will say to you is when you do that, realize one size does not fit all. If you go to Kmart to buy a dress, it may or may not fit you. Okay? Be very thoughtful when you get those agreements and read them very carefully. And I know you're just starting a business. I'm not suggesting you go to a high-priced lawyer every time you do something, but think about what you've got and whether or not it covers what you want it to cover and whether or not you know yourself that it will cover you. If it's something that's important to you and you intend to make money on it, invest a little bit of your time and money to do that stuff right. Especially when you're selling your art. You're selling, you are basically, your asset is you. Okay. Insurance. I'm going to do this really fast. Here's the biggest thing you need to know. Your personal liability insurance and your personal automobile insurance does not cover you in your working world. Read your policy very carefully. Do not assume that if you are driving around for work that your personal automobile coverage will cover you. Go to your insurer. Make sure you find out if there's an endorsement you can buy or if you need a separate policy. Yes, sir.
When I had my own business prior to working here, I would go and visit different companies, and I didn't know this, and someone mentioned it to me. So when I renewed my auto insurance, it says, "Do you use your car at all for work?"
The answer is
so
yes.
I said yes, and to be honest, I think my premium went up like $6 a month. So it wasn't a lot, but it got me the protection. So don't be scared that all of a sudden you're going to pay $10,000 a year in auto insurance. But if you don't say it and you're not honest about it, you could be in trouble. But at least my personal experience, and that's all I can talk to, was the change in my premium was like this much.
Yes, ma'am.
This is kind of a dumb question, but would an umbrella policy cover that issue?
Not unless it's a business umbrella.
Okay, thanks.
You need to actually make sure it's there. So general liability covers bodily injury, property damage, usually covers your legal defensive claims. We talked a little about auto. Workers' comp, if you have 4 or more employees, you are obligated to have it. It's statutorily required. Less than 4 employees in Florida, you do not have to have workers' comp. I have a workers' comp policy, even though I only have a law office, and you would say, well, what is going to happen that my employees might get hurt? It's not that expensive to have it, and should something happen, we have a policy. Healthcare insurance, sometimes you might want to offer that in your business. It's usually very hard to buy a business policy unless you have 10 employees. Otherwise, it's really just like a personal policy. Unemployment insurance, also statutory. You have to pay it. It's part of payroll taxes. There's other business insurances you might consider. I would strongly recommend you get to the right business insurer. Insurance is an asset of your business. I know you pay out of pocket for it, but when something happens, it gives you legal defense, it pays your costs, it covers your butt when you need it. So 3 rules of business, and this is on the financing issue. Have cash, have cash, have cash. 3 more rules, have cash. Okay. Here's the issue. You are not going to get loans when you get started in business. It is very hard unless you have physical assets and a going concern. You can get personal loans, you can rely on your personal savings, you can get a line of equity from your home, you can use your credit cards, which is a very expensive way to be in business, but sometimes you do it. Sometimes you can get an SBA loan if you have some physical assets, like you're buying a hotel, you're buying an operating business, maybe you're buying a print shop and it's already up and running. You can usually get a loan for something like that that's up and running, and the SBA helps. There's something called crowdfunding. Does anyone know what that is? Crowdfunding is, it's like Kickstarter, I think is one of them. You basically can get out there and describe your project, and you can get people to put money in to help support your project, in return for which, you know, maybe they'll get a copy of your first CD you produce, as opposed to an interest in your company. There are sites out there, there are articles out there, there's a lot of information on how
just
it
Google
works.
it, yeah.
Go look it up. Grant money. Don't get your hopes up. Unless you're a not-for-profit, there's not a lot of grant money for small businesses and startups. So, I know I said I'd cover financing your business. It's called Friends and Family, folks. This is the time when you say to Mom and Dad, I know you thought you were done when you put me through college, and I know you thought you were done after you made that nice wedding for me, and I know you thought you were all done when you helped pay a little tuition for the kids to go to private school, but guess what, Mom? I'm back. And hope that they'll help you. Business accounting, you're going to want a small business accountant to help you if you don't know how to do this. There's QuickBooks. Cash flow statement, you're going to need it if you ever are going to get a loan. You're going to want to keep track of these things in order to be able to eventually finance your business. Plus, you need to know if you're making money. You need to be able to look at your profit and loss and say, was this new design profitable? Was it worth it? You want to do break-even analysis. That's the point when you've spent this much money and I'm probably doing this backwards, or this much money, where does it break even? Where's that spot? I tend to like professionals. If I'm serious about being in business, I'm going to invest in having professionals help me. I would tell you need to be very disciplined about keeping good books and records. You need to invest in some sort of software. I use a payroll company to do my payroll. I have a matter management system that does my accounting also. I use online banking. You need to really think about this. Startup costs are a lot for all of these little systems. It's a little bit for each one of the systems. So it's hard to swallow it all at once. But if you're going to be in business, you need to act like you're in business. You need to track your spending. Marketing and sales. Marketing is the process of educating your clients. Sales is the process of convincing your clients to buy products. Okay, you see the difference? So marketing is your website, your communications, your direct mailers, your giving speeches like this. Sales is when you actually get somebody in to buy that new design, that graphic design, that logo. Think of it as the more educated your clients are, the more likely your clients can buy from you. Different ways you can advertise. I will tell you there are some neat things out there. Networking is always the best, but there are some neat local publications. Like, you know, if you live in South Tampa or Brandon or New Tampa, there's those little tabloids that are specific to your area. They're not expensive. You can get yourself in them. I had somebody tell me that she gets on TV all the time. I'm like, how do you get to TV all the time? Well, every time there's a big event like Asperilla or something, she is out there with her sign. The competition. Is it okay to go scope out the competition and check out what they're doing?
Better.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. You know, I'm a lawyer and I will tell you there are rules and there are antitrust rules about that, but you sure better know what they're doing. Go to their stores, check them out, go look at their designs, see what's going on. Go to your clients and say, hey, you know, you chose to do business with me this time. Tell me why, and tell me what I could do better and maybe what my competition. Tell me what my competition isn't doing that I could be doing that would make a difference for you. Find out. Nothing wrong with it. Take a long, hard look at yourself and talk about your own strengths and weaknesses and figure out what your competition is busy figuring out about you and get ahead of the game on your own business. Write a business plan. Describe your business, know who the owners and investors are, identifies who the products and services are. This is not an 80,000-page thesis. It's a short, it could be 5, 10 pages maybe, living document for a small business. You're updating it all the time. You go back maybe once a month and look at it and say, did I do what I said I was going to do? It tells you who the competition is. Where are your markets? How big are your markets? When you first get into business? I mean, are you Tampa? Are you national? You know, if you're just getting into business, I'd say start small. Don't try and go too big.
A business consultant told me recently, if you have a business with no plan, you have a plan for no business.
Well said. Defines revenue and expense projections, identifies who your suppliers are going to be, sets some targets and goals. Like, I'm going to pick on my friend up here because he was the first one to raise his hand. If the goal is to get up when you feel like it, you better have a plan on how you're going to make money. But it might be that you're so invigorated by your business that getting up is never a problem because you're excited about what you do every day.
Maybe your business happens at night.
And maybe business happens at night. So, anyway, failure to plan is a plan to fail. There are examples of business plans. SCORE teaches a business planning course, so it doesn't have to be daunting. Other resources, sunbiz.org is the Secretary of State of Florida. You have access to the laws, like if you're going to be in a licensed business. It gives you business organizations where you file your trademarks.
LLC too, right?
LLCs, yeah. USPTO, you can search other people's trademarks. I mean, you can go check out the design for somebody else's trademark. You can go say, hey, I thought I saw that was kind of cool. I'd be like really interested in seeing more about that design and what colors they're using and how they're doing it. You can go and do some research on them. You can also make sure that your design's not infringing on theirs. MyFloridaLicense.com, it gives you business license information. There's lots of reasons why you need business licenses. I mean, this is like a Reader's Digest version, or sometimes known as 20 pounds of in a 10-pound bag. I just jammed it all in there. Department of Labor, DOL.gov, all the federal employment regulations are available to you there. Copyright.gov, that's the Library of Congress, where you can check out copyrights and where you can register your copyrights. Thank you very much.
Questions?
I'd be happy to answer questions, and I'd be happy to stick around for anyone who has questions. Because I know I really did shove a lot in a small bag.
So people will be able to take a look at the agreements?
They're
the
up there.
samples?
There's different ones up there. Take a look at them.
I
If
just-
anybody wants them, sign up and tell me, and Chanel and I will email you what you want.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just have my paper. I wanted to just see this. It's my electronic article incorporation,
Uh-huh.
and I just wanted to make sure this is correct.
Okay, I'll take a look at them in a minute. So, anyone else before? Okay, I'll be around and.
Shelley, thank you so much.